Hello everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
and it's number 270 in Sounding the Jolly Old Shallows.
And you never know, today may be a monumentous day.
Yeah, everyone's talking about Alaska, but let's just wait and see, shall we? What happens as a
Yeah, well,
result
let's
of
talk
that.
about some other things then, because we really don't know, do we? But it was interesting because, last week, I think it was you quoted this thing about that somebody had seen on a church door.
Yeah, that's right. It was a quote in a book by Monica Furlong
That's right.
about the Church of England. It said it was just somebody, this was a very ordinary sign somebody put outside the church saying something about the door being stiff and push hard and it will come and that the church actually is open.
Yeah.
Which obviously she
Yeah.
felt was a very good way to begin
Yeah.
a very large book about how the Church
Well,
of
we
England
had
is.
such a good email from somebody who we do actually know quite well, who was saying that she loved the quote and it seemed to her a metaphor for some people's experience of trying to get into the church as a whole. And she said it reminded her of something she made a note of way back in 2017, and she had to go and ferret out an ancient journal to find it. I was very impressed with that.
I don't think she's old enough to have an ancient journal. She
I
might
was
have.
thinking more that I don't think I'd ever find an ancient journal if I went to look for it. But anyway, she did. Because she said it was when the Grenfell Tower burnt. And in a news article, the Reverend Alan Everett of St Clement's Church near the tower said, "I was woken up at 3 a.m. and so I came down to the church, opened the door and turned the lights on." And she says it struck her in her mind ever since as somehow being the right response to a crisis. And it's interesting, I mean, a crisis like that, which was such a huge crisis, or maybe the crisis of an individual, the same thing. And maybe that's us, Are the lights on? Is the door open? It's such a challenge.
I liked it,
It's,
actually. I think
yeah.
I did understand that. I think I'm made a bit like that when something big happens, I do tend to tidy up. But the part of it's part of a mechanism which says anything can happen now. And I do remember when we were at a place called Burswood in Kent, which was a healing place. Well, that was,
Oh yes,
that
it's
certainly
closed now,
had been a
hasn't
healing
it? But
place.
yeah, it was Dorothy Kerrin, wasn't it?
a lady called Dorothy Kerrin, who was dramatically healed as a young woman. But I remember we went there to work for a while, and it was a very puzzling place because there were quite a lot of quite rich people who'd kind of found a place to not to hide, but a refuge.
Yes, or maybe
And,
other people had found a place for them to be refuged
Well, maybe,
in.
and then people who
yeah.
really needed to be
Yeah.
to be there for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
But it was very quirky and kind of posh and very clean. I mean, that's what I thought when we went into it. And I remember asking them.
Posh and clean.
Yeah, the clean.
I'm not sure you've summed up the whole place,
No,
if I'm
the
honest.
clean bit is the crucial bit, because I said to somebody in the first day, it seems to me there's a huge emphasis on this place being pristine, spotless. And that person said, I think that's because we have a feeling that we've got to always be ready
Always be ready.
for when he comes. And I suppose they were talking about Jesus. I don't know quite, but that feeling that you are ready, you're up for it, to be able to deal with whatever comes crashing along.
And we have seen again and again, haven't we, in the news and various other things, how many people have put the lights on, opened the door. I remember the refugees from Ukraine first coming over the borders into Germany and being incredibly welcomed. And obviously, there's been all sorts of complications since and all sorts of difficulties. And I'm not saying that, if you think about the immigration problem, that it's not always the solution. But the fact is that as Christians, that is what we're asked to do, isn't it? Have the lights on and have the door
I don't
open.
know, yeah, I thought that sounds a bit It sounds, the way I
Have
feel
a
just
cup
at the
of tea
moment,
ready.
very weary.
I'm sorry, I thought
Well, I
it
think-
sounded so prosaic.
No, having a cup of tea ready is much better than most solutions. If you remember the time when we had no tea, do you remember we'd had a hard weekend? And we went home and there was no tea. We went next door, no tea. It was late in the evening. The shop was shut. There was nowhere to get tea. We sat like strange, twisted adults, staring at the walls
Pathetic,
and longing
really.
for tea. No, I mean, I think tea is one of God's great creations.
Well, and if you remember, our friend who was involved with paramedics said that what they do in putting a hot cup of sweet tea into the hands of somebody who's suffering from shock is that it brings them connected with earth again. And even if they don't like sugar in their tea, which I've always worried because I hate it, but it's the warmth and it's the solidness of the cup and holding it in two hands that actually brings them down, literally sort of connects them with life and with earth and with all things familiar, really. Yes, yeah. It's been really interesting to think about that, though, because just at the moment, just in this last couple of weeks, there's been this documentary about a Christian movement that clearly started okay but went very wrong, and that was very welcoming. You know, a lot of people who were struggling with their lives arrived and found that instead of the rather cold nun welcome that they'd sometimes received, like a single mum was talking about, how they were allowed to feel almost immediately they were part of something. So I suppose the welcome isn't everything. I mean, you need to keep your lights on in different ways, don't you? You need to be aware all the time as to whether people are running away from...
One of the great strengths of the church, I mean, the church has many weaknesses, as we know. I mean, yes, the organised church, any organised church, but one of the strengths is that it does offer community to a lot of people who feel they don't have one. Belonging, yes. The problem is that if you, in any sense, begin to fake it, to fake the spiritual bit of it, it's probably going to fall. I remember in a completely different part of the world from this, but I remember going to a group who were so alive. I mean, these were Christian people. They were led by a man who was a Christian minister of some kind.
And that's not the organisation
No,
that
this
we've
is a very
seen in
different
this
one.
documentary.
This is quite
right.
a small group. And there was a lot of hugging and a lot of physical affection, right? Nothing wrong with hugging and physical affection. There was almost an abandonment to the joy of feeling you were free. And I went twice there. I went once, and the second time I was really pleased because they said, can you bring books that you think are good books for people to read? And I said, you don't mean just the Bible? They said, no, any. And so I went and did that, and that was fine. But the second time when I was there, I felt there was something very wrong. And I felt this a couple of times in places. There was something in the air that was wrong. And in fact, I don't know how long after it was. We're always tempted to say very soon, but after that, it just fell apart because the things that were happening there were they lost their hold on the reason why they were supposed to be happy, or not happy. No, that's wrong. Lost it in touch with the reason why they were creating a community for people, which is,
I suppose the problem is
Christians
that
anyway.
as soon as you close doors on anything, I mean, you were going in as an outsider, so you saw it, you sensed something, you felt something. It didn't feel quite right. But you know, in the therapy that was being offered to some of the survivors from the thing that's had the documentary about it, it was mentioned that metaphor that I remember hearing a long, long time ago, that if you put frogs into cold water and then you gradually add hot water, so it's a little bit warm and then a little bit warm and then a little bit warm, the acclimatization means that they're not quite as aware when it gets to boiling point. And I think that what you're saying is that something that probably did start in a tremendously good, well-meaning way, and I'm not saying all organisations do, but I think a lot do. People talk about feeling as though they've arrived in heaven. They talk about not being able to believe how welcome they were and how okay everything felt. And then as things start to go wrong, they can't really believe that it's going wrong because they've still got the warm feeling of warm water. And then when it gets to boiling and they are hurt, it's too late. And it is that sense, isn't it? And I know there's a lot more talk about safeguarding now, but we need to safeguard ourselves, I think, a bit more and sort of look maybe a bit more objectively at whether we are either becoming too powerful or being allowing ourselves to be a bit caught up in something.
What do you mean by we? Do you mean we?
Well, individually, I think it's very easy because most people I've met in the church actually are wanting to be better than they are. I don't mean superior, I mean gooder, I suppose.
Better behaved, you mean?
No, I mean looking at the things that, more loving, more generous, more more self-control, more all those other things.
To be involved in being loving and
yes, that you and therefore the bits of you that you're going to suppress them a bit instead of working on them. Maybe I don't know. I'd be interested to know what other people think.
The other metaphor used by the therapist who was dealing with this group of people was to do with these aren't her words, but swallowing something whole, a concept, because the immediate rewards were so great in terms of feeling a joy and a completeness and an involvement with community and all that. And so in the end you're left with a large indigestible lump inside you, which is, because it's not digested, is extremely difficult to get rid of. So that some of those who had been most hurt or most injured by what had happened to them, and some of them were quite extreme, were still saying, I would go back to it if I could, because the good things seemed so good. And what I do think is it's a lesson for many of us, especially if we're talking about Christians, especially perhaps those in the evangelical end of the church, that you find something there that is often just what you want. The immanence of God, the possibility of God being close.
The possibility of the immanence of God.
And a behaviour that fits that, and all of those things. As you get to the age we are now, I know I and you and a number of other people we know, we have to go through a very careful process in order to keep the thing that made it worthwhile in the first place.
And what would you say that process was?
It's partly decluttering. It's being brave enough and free enough and open enough to say, I can't say these things anymore.
But I can say this.
But I can say this.
Yeah.
And I read a quote by Muggeridge.
Oh, well, that's the other thing we were going to talk about, because we seem to have got these two quotes, don't we? Yes, say what the one from Malcolm Muggeridge.
Speaking, but I'm sorry, I can't remember who he was quoting, but some great Christian, whatever that means.
I'm sure somebody will tell us next week.
It was simply, I don't know if it's simple, but he was saying the Christian faith within each of us has to change in order that it can remain the same. And I think that's what I'm trying to say, and said so badly, is that when you dust yourself down, your experiences, and we've had some amazing experiences over the years, all over the world, with churches and people helping and people not helping, and awkward situations,
or witnessing
and wonderful situations, seeing them, usually being people who were there to do a job of some kind. Out of all that, not a jumble sale, because that implies useless stuff, but that muddle of things, some of which are not helpful. Things we used to think. When you first met me, I was a rabid something or other. But for some peculiar
you were
reason,
very stern. That's
you
for
joined me in my my faith then. But now, I do often don't hear the voice, but I remember reading about Jesus being with the disciples after he came back to life. They're in this locked place, and he appears, and it says he opened their minds.
Yeah.
And I think that process of having your mind opened can be a very painful one, partly because of the indigestible stuff that I was talking about, and partly because, in a sense, you're more on your own with it. You've really got to look at
well, it's
yourself.
scary, I think. I think it's easy to talk about decluttering. And I know one or two people for whom that word sets up an absolute panic. So, even that isn't simple. But, to bring up something that has been lodged in you for that long can make you sick. It can make you ill. It can fragment your confidence and your mind, and so it's very scary sometimes to look at things that you've just settled there, and yes, they may be solidly indigestible, but they're not to be looked at. And obviously in this documentary they were talking about abuse, but it might well not be that. It might well just be something that you hung on to as a certainty way past its sell-by date.
You hear somebody with a loud voice and a sense of total knowledge and conviction talking about the fact that you're going to go to hell because of something you've done or do.
Or did when you were years, young. Or, it can be your sexuality, and that could even apply to being a woman. It can certainly apply to being a child. Never mind all the other things that we have to look at now. But that doors open and the lights on has always had to be the first thing, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've tried to say this in a number of ways over the recent years, and one of them is very silly and simple, but which is normally we say there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but there's a real value in absorbing the possibility that there is always a tunnel at the end of the light.
What, you mean you get a little bit of light?
No.
What do you mean exactly?
You do have a light. We have a friend who was rescued from the difficulties of life by going into that organisation that's been in the news now. But and that is a real and true thing that happened.
Yes,
but
it is.
There comes a point where something says to you, maybe it's an experience or maybe it's the beginning of a different wisdom, that you're very grateful for what you've got. You now know who the author of it is, but the people who actually rescued you, or their way of doing things, or the thing you're involved with, is not what you thought it was. And you might have to move on, and that might
or just go back. It might be moving on, but it might be going back to what it was that was so important to you when you first went.
That's what I meant by, or this person must have meant by, you have to change your faith in order to stay where you are.
Yeah.
Because where you want to stay is what was real and not faked.
Yeah.
It's not saying it's easy.
No, it's not. And I know there's always a danger of people saying, oh, he's got really woolly, or she's got really woolly in her old age, far too liberal or far too... But there is... the person who said to you once, and I know will have quoted this before, who was a very black and white person, and who said, I've come to realise that in between black and white there's silver. And I think that's what we're looking for, not a sort of floppy, all things are okay, but the silver, the the beauty
Yeah.
in the middle of things, so that you don't have to be afraid, you don't have to worry about, you don't have to judge, you don't have to stand on your own little soapbox. You don't have to be like Canute, determinedly trying to make the waves go back. You can just, I don't know, get on with being, maybe. No?
I don't know. For me, it seems to be a withdrawal from being in charge of what I am, and just making sure that no, it's not even making sure about my motivation. I mean, for me, I know the name of Jesus is toxic. It's sick making to many people, but for me, it's the source, the root, the strength of who I not of who I am. It isn't even that, but that's where it's at.
And you don't have to shout in a big group of people the name of Jesus to make it real, to psych yourself up to make it real. It's when you've got rid of everything else, what is left.
Someone asked me on the interview I did this week what Jesus meant to me, and I find it very difficult to answer. It's like someone saying, "What does your wife mean to you?" Or
what would you say? No.
Well, that would be much easier. No, but it's difficult. But what I did say to him was that when I first became interested in being a Christian, it was because the response that I seemed to be aware of was yes.
I remember.
And although that sounds a very tiny thing,
oh no,
it was a yes, and I still have the yes in me. So when I go back and I think, oh, I'm getting very muddled and there's so much clutter around, and I think I still have that yes in me.
And that's what you still want to give to other people.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
I know a lot of people who would agree with you. It's the church, it's keeping the church doors open and the lights on, the yes.
Keep the lights on,
the love that stands at the door and says, come in.
Yeah.
It's it's a bit of a challenge. But if we're going to stay safe and we're going to help other people to stay safe, it's a big job.
It is. By the way, we have had other things sent to us, which might read one or two
about gifts.
About gifts, that's some very interesting things.
So we'd love to hear some more of those as well. But also, who knows? The world may have changed by next week.
And meanwhile, we'll go away and wonder what we've been talking about. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.